Today, I'd like to talk about trustworthiness in qualitative research, making the path clear. Our objectives are to define trustworthiness, detail the story that led to this discussion, discuss how we might make the trustworthiness path clearer, present an example of a matrix, ask questions about how we might use this matrix, protocol, plan, or strengthen trustworthiness within qualitative research, and discuss potential collaboration. For the purpose of this presentation, I'd like to use Lincoln and Gruber 1995. We all know, those of us who use trustworthiness in our work, know that there are several approaches to trustworthiness and rigor in the literature. But we're going to use Lincoln and Gruber 1985 for this discussion. What is trustworthiness? On page 290 in the Lincoln and Gruber text, they discuss these words. The basic issue in relation to trustworthiness is simple. I want you to remember that because we'll talk about that again. How can the inquirer persuade his or her audiences that the findings of an inquiry are worth paying attention to, worth taking account of? What arguments are mounted? What criteria invoked? What questions asked that we would be persuasive on this issue? Well, let's talk about why this began, or how this began, or what happened. Why did I decide I wanted to write about trustworthiness? I mean, there are many other portions of the research process, but this one became particularly interesting to me while on a dissertation committee. In 2014, a PhD student who was writing her proposal had no information about trustworthiness within the document that I was about to sign off on. And I asked her, well, where's that section? It's a qualitative proposal. She said, we've not discussed that, but I don't mind discussing it with you. Her question was to me, why didn't my chair talk to me about this? I said, I have no answer for that. I reported to her as a qualitative researcher, I could not sign off on the proposal until we discussed this idea and that the information needed to be added to the proposal before I would sign it. The caveat here is that I've known the student through the BSN program, the MSN program, and now the PhD program. But she assumed that I would naturally sign this proposal. However, I didn't, and she didn't speak to me for almost a year. But I continued to try to communicate with her and talk to her, and she finally responded, and we talked about what was missing in the proposal. For the next full summer, though, I spent teaching her about trustworthiness, where it started, where it originated from, the classics, literature, helped her find articles on this topic, suggested readings for her. And then finally, we wrote a plan. We made the path clear, and she said that was very helpful. It took an awful long time. She and I were so impressed by our work that we wrote an article about it, and we published that this past year. Here are 4 important points. Truth value and trustworthiness means establishing confidence in the truth of the findings of the study. Applicability is the extent to which the findings have usefulness in other contexts. Consistency means these findings can be repeated. We hear about these in our classes, our method classes in qualitative research. And then neutrality, the degree to which the findings are determined by the subject and not the researcher. So here's our work, so to speak. and that is to produce research that aligns with these precepts so that new and novice researchers are not likely, who are not likely to understand this process, are given some guidance. The discussion point today is that given the details of this process, a student or novice researcher will need background information as well as a protocol to assist them with the creation of a clear path. If you think of quantitative research, everything is concrete and directive, so to speak. However, in qualitative research, we don't have such a clear path. Our discussion point here is to create this clearer path for qualitative researchers. Value of trustworthiness, according to Lincoln and Goober, 1985. Remember, we're using this rendition, and there are other approaches to trustworthiness in qualitative research. They suggest that the value of a research study is strengthened by its trustworthiness. As established by Lincoln and Goober in the 1980s, trustworthiness involves establishing at least these 4 criteria: ability, transferability, dependability, and confirmability. There are newer renditions, again, but these are the ones that we're using for the purpose of this presentation. Transferability, confidence in the truth of the findings. Transferability, showing that the findings have applicability. Dependability, showing that these findings are consistent and could be repeated. And confirmability, the degree to which neutrality or the extent to which the findings of the study are shaped. Now, here is something that we rarely see. There are ethical issues in establishing rigor for trustworthiness in research studies and qualitative research. Agan and Webster have written about this, and it's included in Hayes, Wood, Dale, and Kirk Jenkins' 2016. Establishing rigor or research quality in qualitative research is an ethical issue because poorly aligned or poorly designed studies may lead to misinterpretations that affect client treatment and or risk harm to participants. So we need to be very careful about how we create our studies and how we create our trustworthiness processes. Again, we say here are the 4 criteria or the 4 categories. We know these. Here are the activities of the researcher. Here are debriefing for credibility, member checking. We all, qualitative researchers, know this. We know these activities. Transferability, thick description, journalism, journaling, dependability, inquiry, audit with audit trail, affirmability, triangulation with journaling. We know those. We know the criterion. We know the steps. We know the techniques. It's very clear in the literature. No matter what rendition or approach we use, what we are to do is very clear. But here is what's not clear. When do we do these things? How do we do these things? Where are these activities done? And who completes the activities? So for me, the next step is the most important step, in my view. The what and the why, we have these. These next 4 questions, when, how, where, and who, are not as clear. And if we don't explain those to our students, to novice researchers, perhaps to other qualitative researchers, I believe that there is some confusion about what happens next. So one of the purposes of this presentation is to highlight What do we do next? Or how do we make this path clearer? When do we start the trustworthiness process? Who decides? If indeed we have planned our trustworthiness process, we are better able to answer these questions. If we say we should be able to track, audit the process, then how do we do this if there's no clear path? How and when do we decide the ending or the beginning of the process? Again, the purpose of this workshop is to discuss a clear path. My answer to the questions, or our answer to the questions based on our article that we wrote, is a protocol for trustworthiness within qualitative studies. We put forth this argument that many qualitative studies do not contain a trustworthiness protocol that's clearly written, so that others who read the study can see what the actual activities were or which activities were planned and when. This would give good direction to new and novice qualitative researchers along with dissertation students. We believe it would provide a clear path. Okay, here's the example, a protocol. The protocol could be written or could be in chart format. Those of us who use Lincoln and Gruber's criterion, remember that credibility is one of the first criterion. And one of the activities is member checks. Now, whichever activity that the researcher decides on, we're putting forward today. We decide on that technique for your qualitative study, as opposed to all of the other ones. And what is the purpose of that technique? We also want evidence of and a description of the process that you plan to use as you create that activity. We also would like to see dates planned and actually completed. I think what we're saying in this snapshot of the protocol, what are the details? I think what's been missing is not just the protocol, but the details of how the researcher completed the trustworthiness process. Findings and write-up, possible suggestions. Create a protocol for trustworthiness within the document. Most likely, this would be contained in the methods section. This would be a plan for trustworthiness. Findings to include a summary of activities around the trustworthiness process. Table documenting trustworthiness activities. At the very least, a paragraph citing evidence of activities related to trustworthiness. Here, what I'm saying is, and I look back on my own dissertation, I had a section on trustworthiness. I described what I planned to do and in the findings what was actually done. Appendices could include journal, a sampling of the journal. The same student, that's what she included in her appendices. Finally, we're striving for transparency. The goal in creating a protocol, a matrix, or a chart for transparency is for transparency and clarity. I think it clears the path and directs the researcher. I think this is a missing link for the trustworthiness path. We know what to do, but we do not have clear direction on how, when, where, or why to complete these activities related to our trustworthiness actions. Now, over the next probably 5 or 6 slides, we portray each one of the criterion and actions used related to each criterion. They also include information that can be written into the protocol. Here is an example. Credibility. Let's talk about peer debriefing. Suggested activities, plan for the protocol. Right, this is within your proposal. Number 1, you're going to commission a peer reviewer to work with the researcher during the time of the reviews and data collection. This person will probably have to complete an attestation form to work with the researcher. You can write about how often you plan to meet with this person and what happens during these visits. I'm going to talk about your feelings, actions of the subjects, thoughts, ideas that are presented during this time. Discuss blocking or clouding or feelings of confusion. Discuss dates and times for all of these activities and when they need to be addressed at the next visit. You can even say that we'll meet once a week for 30 minutes to an hour. Each one of these visits with your peer reviewer need to be journaled. Write these thoughts down, the thoughts that surface, and keep the dates for the research and the evaluation clear. You might use a computer for these files, or you can write them. So with each one of these criterion, activities, you would write what they are, what to expect, and what needs to be done on the next visit, or what wasn't done on this visit. So I think we're really talking about details. And so we talk about these details over the next 4 slides. Credibility, actions, and plans in detail. The next one is transferability. We talk about these in detail. Talk about thick description and what this is. And we describe what thick description means to the researcher and to the peer reviewer at the time, at the meeting. Are you actually getting thick description? You can answer that question. Yes, we are. No, we aren't. How do we increase the thick description? Because we've said this is one of our criterion. Dependability, the plans. You're going to have external audits. What is the external auditor looking for? Who is the auditor? When did you choose the auditor? Why did you choose this person to be the auditor? All of these details need to be written up in the protocol. Confirmability. Let's look at progress notes. Of course, we can include these in our journals, and the journal should be dated with times. Confirmability 2, triangulation. If you choose triangulation, which we believe you will, why did you choose triangulation? What type of triangulation did you choose and why? What are the references that go along with those choices. Every design that you choose for the study, what is it? What design are you choosing and why? And what references are you using? This would lead, this one confirmability, this one criterion would lead us to believe that the trustworthiness process actually starts in the methods, in the writing of the methods section, in the beginning of the method, so that you write about all of your ideas that relate to your research question, your method decisions, your methodological decisions, and the interrelatedness of these decisions. So then, question for the attendees. I hope that you are able to hear the questions and that we'll have some assistance with the questions. After we finish these questions, we also have an example of a matrix or protocol used by a student. The question is, the first question is, do you think that a protocol, a matrix, or chart would make the path clearer for novice qualitative researchers? Raise your hand if you think yes. The next question is this protocol, matrix, chart idea too limiting for qualitative research? Raise your hand if you think yes. Raise your hand if you think no. Is this idea something that you believe other researchers need to know? Raise your hand if you think yes. Raise your hand if you think no. Would you suggest a text that focuses primarily on trustworthiness alone? Raise your hand if you think yes, and raise your hand if you think no. Current literature references enough to keep the trustworthiness path clear? Raise your hand if you think yes, and raise your hand if you think no. Are you interested in collaborating on a text or article about this topic? Raise your hand if you think yes. I'm not going to ask if you think no. Before we have questions for Dr. Linda, I'd like to show you, and we have references, I'd like to show you an example of a student whose dissertation was entitled Male Registered Nurses and Employment Choice. This is her dissertation. These are her qualitative rigor and trustworthiness steps. As you can see, for credibility, I go back. One of the sentences here is conducting the research using qualitative methods and established online guidelines. I point this out here because there may be specific items related to your or the students or the novice researchers' qualitative research that need to be outlined under each criterion. Here's another example. Using member checking during the online focus group. You see, her words are not just member checking, but they are very specific and detailed, using member checking during the online focus group discussion to clarify participant statements, use of emoticons, and use of language. There is a use of printed discussion threads, use of the researcher's reflective diary, peer debriefing between the researcher and the peer reviewer. Now, if we look at these two topics here, let's look at first the use of the researcher's reflective diary. If this is a chart or protocol, on this side, I would think we'd have when she started the reflective diary, when she ended the reflective diary, if it was reviewed by a peer reviewer or auditor, and perhaps even how many pages are included in the diary. All of this could be written out in a table format at the end of the dissertation. What I do like about what the student added are references related to her trustworthiness plans or activities. You see the peer debriefing, but what does that mean? How many times did they meet? Who was there? How long was the meeting? What was discussed during the meeting? When we look at transferability, we look at the online focus group. Here's an example. We look at the online focus group. It's used in marketing and advertisement research and can be applied to other healthcare groups such as female nurses and patients. This is a good idea, but where did this come from? Was it from the participants? Was this from the peer reviewer? Was this from the auditor? Was this from the researcher? I think what we're saying here is we need specificity, detail, and a protocol. We're moving on now to the back, probability, and the researcher wrote note checking. Again, we're looking for how was this done and what format was this done. And how many of the participants were able to review transcripts? Did every last one of the participants review the transcripts? Did the participants have comments? And what were those comments? Did the participants mail back the comments, email back the comments? How were the comments received? Because we want to know that what participants said were their words, and they agree on these words. Review of the audit trail and the researcher's reflective diary by an auditor. In my reading of dissertations and qualitative studies, I have rarely seen that auditors gave a report of what they read and what they did. In fact, for the trustworthiness process, it may even be very important to to do this. After the auditor is commissioned, the auditor is trained on the work that is to be done, why it is to be done, how it is to be done, how it is to be completed, and those credentials, that training documented. So I think we're saying several things here. That there is a process for trustworthiness, such as a protocol. That there is a clear and transparent path for the protocol and for the activities within the protocol. That there are specific training for the auditors, for the peer reviewer, and even for the new qualitative researcher. Now, some would ask, when would we do this? Because courses, if we're talking about the dissertation student, would we add this into the qualitative research class? This is a lot of detail for the learn. I I think that there needs to be just a little bit more detail. I also think there should be a methods class for qualitative research because this is so very important. And as we have seen in the slides above, there's value added to using trustworthiness in a qualitative research study. We also know that there are ethical issues related to not following trustworthiness concepts and criteria within qualitative studies. Thus, if we go back to our slides, answer protocol for trustworthiness within qualitative studies, we put forth this argument that qualitative studies should contain trustworthiness protocol, just as it contains an interview protocol and a sampling protocol, a research protocol. We are putting forth today that qualitative studies contain a trustworthiness protocol. This will give direction to new and novice qualitative researchers along with dissertation students, and it will provide a clear path for trustworthiness. Again, I ask, do you think that qualitative protocol would make a clearer path for novice qualitative researchers? Is this protocol matrix chart, is this idea too limiting for qualitative research? Is this idea something that you believe other researchers need to know? Would you suggest a text that focuses on this topic only? Are current literature references enough to keep the trustworthiness path clear? And finally, are you interested in collaborating on a text or article about trustworthiness, making the path clear? Okay, this is the end of the presentation, and I'd like to know if you have questions for Dr. Linda. And here's my contact information.
Perfect. Thank you, Linda. That was a great presentation. So we do have a number of questions here. So if you raise your hand, I can see if I can give you the microphone and then you can ask your question. Okay, just a second here. So our first question comes from Majed Al-Harbi. I'll give you the microphone. You can go ahead and ask your question. Hello, Majed? Okay, maybe they don't have a question. I'll just read it out. What does trustworthiness mean in the ethnography? What is your recommendation for a researcher who conducts ethnographic study?
That's a very good question. And there are a couple of ways to handle that question. And I would first say, look at the literature and see what other ethnographers have and ways that they have completed their trustworthiness plans. If you find no way that is useful to you, then we are talking today about creating a trustworthiness plan. And the first step would be to look at as many trustworthiness approaches as possible first. Decide which one best aligns with your method or approach for research. And then create a protocol around that approach. But no matter which approach you choose, look at creating a protocol so that in one area of the protocol, you write down all of the criterion, like what it means to you and your study, and then write down the activities related to your study and this criterion. Make sure there's a match and a fit. And then after you've written down the activities, write down the details that need to be completed related to those activities. That's my recommendation. Next question.
Okay, our next question comes from Tara Schuler. Tara, I'll give you the microphone. If you have one, you can answer your question. Hi, Tara, you can ask your question. Hi, Tara, are you there? Okay, I'll just read out her question. How does this protocol differ from a sound qualitative methodology which should already include triangulation, validation techniques, etc.? This will help me understand the added value of this protocol. Thanks.
Absolutely. When I read dissertations and articles with qualitative methodology, you see the plan, you see the idea. These are the things that I'm going to do. But if indeed a person is to be able to go back and look at what you've done and how you did it, there's not enough detail, specificity about how that was done. There's no when, where, how, what, why. Those questions aren't answered. Now, the protocol is used for two reasons. One, to tell us what we can do and how we can do it and which way to go once we get IRB approval. And then, after that's done, then we can almost add a final column on the end. This was created then. I completed it on this date. The auditor reviewed it. You have a list, you have concrete evidence of the things that you said you were going to do and things that you actually did when you did them. And you can even write the page number of where it appears within your documents. Hope that's a helpful answer.
Perfect. Thanks, Linda. And we have our next question. Can you please put up the example page for dependability again? That's from Lisa Morgan. Someone asked if they missed the dependability page. So you've got a couple people asking.
It's possible that you didn't miss it. It's just that the words are so small, and when I send out the PowerPoint to those who requested, I will make sure that you're able to get all of the slides. So I was afraid that you might not have been able to read it.
Okay, sounds good. And we have a few people asking if the slides will be made available after the presentation. So Linda, if you'd like, you can send them to me and I can put them up on the website if that works.
Surely. I would like to do a couple of things to them first, like put more references. I have lots of references. I found two really important references I want to add, and that was methodological rigor in qualitative research articles, a 15-year review, and a article by Sam Porter, Validity, Trustworthiness, and Rigor, Reassessing the Realism in Qualitative Research. Those two I want to add so that once I add those, I'll send them out to you. Yes.
Perfect. Sounds great. And our next question comes from Susan Crowther. So Susan, I'll unmute your microphone. If you have one, you can ask your question. I don't think she has a microphone. So Susan's question is, I do not think this approach would be helpful in hermeneutic work. I believe another criteria would work better, such as DeWitt or Plog's resonates more closely.
So is there a question or, I am happy that she said that, because this is really about, the presentation really was to raise the issue and some thoughts around how we make this more concrete for our students. Qualitative research is not concrete, and quantitative research is a little bit more concrete, and students say this. But if we are to make the path clear for those who are doing this for the first time, so this is really the reason I am making this plug today. We want to make the path clear for those who are novice, so that they can, so they'll be able to go back and see what they've done or what they plan to do. Those who are experienced in this may not need it, and I'm okay with that. But you have to start somewhere, and that's why one of my questions was, is this too limiting? Or is it useful for the beginner? Sometimes we have to start somewhere. And when you send a student out to learn about trustworthiness and come back and write about it and then do it, I think we're asking a bit much. However, I was able to do it. But if I knew what I know now, I would have created a protocol for myself. I would have known what to do first. I wouldn't have been scrambling. Did I remember to do my trustworthiness actions? Which one was I supposed to do first? So this is not for the seasoned and for those who don't need it. This is for those who may be new to the process, who may need a path to help them know what to do next and what to do first. Thank you for the comment.
Okay, and our next question comes from Bojosi Gamontel. I'll see if I've unmuted you if you want to ask your question. Oh, doesn't look like anyone has a mic today. Okay, the question, whoops, sorry. The question, if you did not necessarily have a trustworthiness protocol at the beginning of your research, but carried out the necessary activities, how do you then write this into your dissertation?
Excellent question. Excellent question. You write where you are. That's all you can write. You don't want to make it up. So you just write where you are, where you started, what you have, and that's what you can do. You can create your protocol at the place where you learn that this is important, and that's all you can do.
Okay, and our next question. In which section of the, from Maria Fernandez Calzada, in which section of the dissertation should I include this matrix, or this matrix will be only to aid my dissertation?
Excellent question again. In my humble opinion, it should be included in the proposal and the method section as an appendix, because this means you've thought about what you're going to do for trustworthiness. And once you receive IRB approval and the approval of your committee to conduct your research, you'll know what to do when. That's what I think, that's where I think it belongs. As an appendix, you don't have to write out every word of what you, but it would be a clear path if it's an appendix in your dissertation proposal.
Okay.
Those are my thoughts. Mm-hmm.
Our next question comes from Ellen Kappas. How do we choose an auditor?
Oh, I think that I want to say students and dissertation qualitative researchers sometimes forget that there are three persons on that team: the debriefer, the auditor, and the peer reviewer, along with the researcher. So that makes four persons on the team other than the dissertation team, unless those people are the committee members. I don't recommend that, but that is possible. How do you select one? Very good question. You select one who you have either trained or has some knowledge of what it is you're doing, or has some ability to read and review and discuss what it is you are attempting to create. You want someone who is able to think about the processes that you are doing. It's just like an auditor of I don't want to say a bank, but the person needs to be able to look through the paperwork and see that you have left a trail representative of what you said that you were going to do. This person doesn't have to be, in my view, a PhD, but they could be. But they do need to be able to read and look at the evidence that you present and be able to comb through and say, okay, she or he have completed the activities and I see the evidence. Thank you for the question.
Okay, and we've got another question here from Gudalina Morenzi. I'm really sorry if I believe I pronounced your name incorrectly. I'll unmute you. If you have a microphone, you can go ahead and ask your question. Hello? Gudalia?
Oh, hi, sorry.
Yeah, no problem. You can go ahead and ask your question.
I would like just to say thank you to Linda for the information. Actually, for me, it's the first time I know about this protocol, and actually I am conducting research that I want to touch with this qualitative method. So I would like to know if she can maybe elaborate more, know how using this protocol can assist with validity or credibility of the findings of our research.
I'll repeat what I think the question is.
Okay.
You want to know how this is going to be useful after you have collected your data and you're ready to write up your findings. And so what difference does it make that you've done this, you've completed this process? Well, in qualitative research, you remember that credibility means that, let me make sure I have this for you. Credibility, and I can go back to it for you. Let's go to the slide. Credibility. Give me a second. Credibility means that, I want you to see this in writing. You have confidence in the truth of the findings. That's the short version, of course. So after you've completed all of your work, the themes, you come up with your themes. How do we know that those themes were made up or were created by the participants? That the ideas come from the participants? Well, if you're using the trustworthiness protocol and you're journaling and you see this new information or this information pop up over and over and over again, your auditor saw it, your peer debriefer heard you talk about it, then you have evidence that it actually exists and that you didn't make it up. So the trustworthiness protocol is there to help you show the evidence for the work and the findings that you write about. I hope that's helpful. Thank you for the question. Hello?
Hi, sorry. It looks like we have one more question from Charles Gian. Charles, I'll unmute you if you have a microphone. Okay, maybe not. Charles' question is, can you show an example of the trustworthy matrix?
Surely. And let me just say, rather than put the whole matrix on there, it would have been so tiny, and I did try to put it on there to begin with, but it was so tiny that I just have for you an example of one row. Remember, we're going to use a table, so we just have one row of what that might look like. So the criteria, and remember we're using Lincoln and Goober 1985, and remember I said there are many different approaches to trustworthiness. Therefore, criterion, the first one is a criteria, the first one is credibility. So I put that credibility on the far left-hand side of the page. This is one of the activities, member checks. And remember that from what I read, the more activities you use within a criterion, the more value added to your trustworthiness. I'll say that again. Here it is, credibility. There are many different activities or techniques that are aligned with this credibility. The more activities you use, and this is just the first row of the table, the more activities you use, the more value and more trustworthiness, more trustworthy your work is. So then, this is the first in the column. This is the second in the column. This is the third in the column, meaning or purpose for your study. For instance, the person earlier asked about ethnography. Well, for ethnography, the member checks might be different or might have a special meaning. So you write the meaning and purpose of the member checks for your study. Then we have the next row, a next column, evidence of the activity. Describe the process and any evidence you have of your work during this study for member checks. And then the last column, dates and planned dates, and then when you actually complete it. You might even add a page of a journal or of a document where these member checks can be seen, so that you have a clear and transparent protocol for what was done, what was completed. I hope that answer was helpful. And this trustworthiness protocol would actually be a long page full of activities and actual evidence, but this is just one row and several columns. And of course, you can set these columns up the way you want to set them up for your study. This is not etched in stone, but the idea of creating a protocol is what we're trying to get across today. Thank you for your question.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Linda. And we are out of time. So if anyone else has any other questions, they can just contact you directly.
Surely, I have my email address. Would you like for me to put that up again?
Sure, that's great. So if anyone has any questions, they can send them in to Linda. So our next month, our masterclass webinar series presentation will be given by Nick Wolf and Christina Silver, and that'll be on September 21st. And they'll be speaking on the topic of don't let the software drive the process, the 5-level QDA method of producing high quality data analysis using ATLAS.ti. So hopefully we'll see you all next month for that presentation. I'd like to thank you all for coming today. Linda, any final words?
Be trustworthy in your qualitative research. That's it.
Perfect.